اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Welcome to session 4 of Qur'an Made Easy. What I want to concentrate on today is just a recap of everything that we've learned so far. I know you must have already got the handouts for lesson 4 and perhaps even lesson 5, but there's no real pressure that we have to start that today. What I want to concentrate on in this session is really go right from the beginning and make consolidated notes right from scratch, and then maybe look at selected slides from previous sessions, probably just the drills or the exercise, and we can just work through some of them and then apply that back to the ayat, especially the Fatiha. I think that would be a really good place to begin today. And if we get time at the end, we'll go over the handout for lesson 4. So what I want you to do, what I'm going to do, is actually get a clean slate of paper, so a document. I don't expect you to get pen and paper just yet. I'd rather just get you, brothers and sisters, to watch and then in your own time do the same thing. What I want to do is just start right from the beginning and just make brief notes on what we already have covered. So we learned that there are 3 types of words in Arabic. And I don't care how scruffy or neat this is, so long as it makes sense to you, and you can make your own consolidated notes as well, and it can be as rough as you like, so long as you understand it. So the first category was ism. The second category was fi'l. And the third category was harf. This is from day 1, lesson 1. And we're going over this concept again, because I would rather do fewer concepts and make sure everyone internalizes it properly, as opposed to just flooding you with so many different ideas and concepts, and it just goes in one ear and out the other. So there's no shame at all in going back. In fact, what I'll do every lesson from now on, we'll start right from the beginning. We won't go through everything, but we'll make consolidated notes so that it slowly it just becomes second nature. So how did we define harf? A harf is a word that makes no sense unless there's another word after it. So I won't write that definition down. You already have the slides for that. But what I will do is just give examples. So I'll just write of, in, with, about. So these are words that make no sense unless there's another word after it. They're very important words in any language. The Qur'an has so many of them as well. But at the end of the day, you need other words to help fit the context of what it's saying. So in what? It could be in there, in the house, in the bedroom, or whatever. About what? About me, about you, about someone or something. So I hope that's clear. Fi'l. Fi'l is an action word, and it's has a past, present, or future tense, and it has a built-in doer. So without writing the full definition, let's just think of an example which will just make it clear. So let's say traveled. Traveled in English, the ed at the end usually signifies that it's a past tense. So as soon as you know it's in a tense, then you know it's a fi'l. Another example, slept. Slept is the past tense. The future tense, the present tense of that is, say, sleeping. However, if I was to say to sleep or to travel, this no longer is a fi'l because it's no longer in a tense. Okay, although it's derived from traveled, and sleep is derived from slept. This is more of an idea, the idea to sleep or the idea to travel. So therefore, as soon as it's an idea, it becomes an ism. Okay? So as soon as it becomes a tense, it's a fi'l. And then going on to ism, it's a person, place, thing, idea, adjective, adverb, and more. I'm not going to write all that out. I just put person, place, thing, idea, adjectives, adverbs, and more. Person, place, thing, idea, adjectives, and more. Let's think of an example for each. So let's put e.g. Think of a person. Put my name, Khalid. So let me just rub this bit out. Person. Think of a place, Makkah. A thing or an object, so you can just say laptop. Person, place, thing, idea. Think of an idea. Well, we just talked about two, the idea of to sleep. You can also say sleeping. So sleeping, an idea. Sleeping is an interesting one because you can use it as an idea, and you can also be as a present tense as well. So it depends on the context, I guess. But if you're talking about the idea of sleeping in itself, then that's an ism. If you say I am sleeping, then that context indicates that it's a fi'l because it's a present tense. So idea, let's think of another idea. Islam is an idea. Adjectives, it's a describing word. So we can describe someone like a tall person, tall. Adverbs usually has an ly at the end, so we can say something like quickly. So a person came running quickly. That idea of quickly is an adverb. So because it describes the way someone is running. And then more, I briefly touched on that. And that's really the idea of pronouns. And what pronouns are words like he, she, they, you, we, I, even both of you and both of them, etc. Just words like that. It's filled in with pronouns in the Qur'an. There's so many of them, but all of that you can call as one category of pronouns, and all pronouns are in the ism category. So out of those three types of words in Arabic, ism, fi'l, and harf, ism you could say is the most comprehensive one. Okay, this pretty much summarizes lesson 1 conceptually without going into the exercises and drills. Thereafter, we kind of applied this concept to the ayat. So let's flick over to the ayat right now, actually. So just by looking at A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, I take refuge with Allah from a cursed shaitan. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to allocate the ism, fi'l, and harf. Let's start with, let's do it in chronological order from what the ta'awudh said. So a'udhu means I take refuge. So there's an action word. Someone is taking refuge. Who's taking refuge? I am taking refuge. So if it's an action word, we need to know what tense is it in. Is it the past? No, that would have been I have taken refuge. Is it the present? It seems that I take refuge. But it doesn't matter what tense it's in. Whatever tense is in, it's a fi'l. So we can say that is a fi'l. Hope that's straightforward enough. Billahi. We can say that the bi and the word Allah are two separate words, and it's kind of joined together for billahi. Bi means with. Allah, we know is Allah. So be means with. Is that an ism, fi'l, or a harf? Is it an ism, fi'l, or harf? We know harf is a word that makes no sense unless there's another word after it. So be on its own is a harf, because with what? So when the next word tells us what it means, the word Allah. The word Allah is a name, so therefore it's an ism. Min means from. Once again, from doesn't make any sense unless there's another word after it. So min on its own is a harf. Ash-shaytani, ash-shaytani is the name of a being, and that being is shaitan, so therefore it's an ism. And ar-rajimi is a describing word of a shaitan, so the accursed shaitan. And we know all describing words are adjectives, and all adjectives are ism. So by looking at the ta'awud, we've worked out already what's the fi'l, what's the harf or huruf, and what's the ism. So now let's go back to the document. The scruffy document, but I hope it's making all sense. So ism, fi'l, and harf. Then we looked at lesson 2. And what we said in lesson 2 is we're going to focus on ism, and we're going to put aside the fi'l and harf for now. And we're going to look at the components of ism. And we found out that there are 4 components of ism. Sorry. What are those components? We listed it out as number 1, status. Number 2, number. Number 3, gender. And number 4, type. We didn't touch on type. We didn't touch on gender. We haven't really touched on number, but maybe briefly. What we're really focusing on is, at the moment, status. So every ism that we see, so for example, the word Allah, it has 4 components to it: status, number, gender, and type. And we drilled in on status, and we came across new terminology. And it might seem confusing at first, but we're just going to go over it again. So we found out the terminology called rafa'. Oops, it's supposed to be an A. Nasab and jar. Rafa', nasab, and jar, also known as marfu', mansub, and majroor. So rafa' could be said, you could say marfu', same thing. Nasab, you could say mansub, and jar, you could say majroor. We're only concentrating on ism. In the fi'l world, you could have a marfu' and mansub. There's no such thing as majroor, but we're not focusing on the fi'l world right now. We're only focusing on the ism. So in the ism world, there's a rafa', nasab, and jar, and every word is either one of these 3 categories. Then we defined what rafa', nasab, and jar is. So this is still lesson 2. And we found that the function of these 3 subcategories, if you like, is to show what rank they have or what position they have in a particular sentence. Now, what does that mean? It means that if I was to write something like Hassan ate lunch yesterday, we're going to allocate where the rafa' is, where the nasab is, and where the jar is in that. And we're also going to find out what the fi'l word is, because the fi'l identifies the action word. So we then defined what rafa', nasab, and jar is. So rafa' status is the doer. You could say it's the main subject of the sentence, but doer is nice and simple. And nasab is the detail. And the jar, we did that in lesson 3. But for now, let's just concentrate on rafa' and nasab. Hassan ate lunch yesterday. So the first thing is, let's find out what the action word is. The action word is the fi'l. So what action word is in this sentence? It's this, ate. Someone is eating something, and it's in the past tense, so it's ate. So therefore, that's the fi'l. Who's doing? So the next question you need to ask yourself is, who's doing that action? And in this case, eating. Who's doing the eating? Or who's done the eating? It's definitely Hassan. Therefore, we know the doer is allocated a rafa' status. So therefore, we're going to say that's an R, because it's rafa'. Hassan is doing the eating. And then the nasab is the detail. So what questions could you ask from this sentence to derive the detail? So the detail is all about the what, the how, the who, the what, the how, the where, and the when. So what question could you ask about what Hassan did? So you could ask, what did Hassan eat? And the answer to that question is, what Hassan ate? Lunch. So lunch is the detail. So therefore, the detail is nasab. What other question could you ask from this? You can't really ask where, because it doesn't answer that question. You could ask when. You could say, when did Hassan eat lunch? You could say, he ate lunch yesterday. So yesterday is a detail. So therefore, that's a nasab as well. If you wanted to ask where, then you can say something like outside. And therefore, that would also be nasab, because that answers the question of where Hassan ate lunch. So for us to move on to the Arabic now, we really have to just solidify these concepts and just know it at the back of our hand. So hopefully that's clear as to, first of all, what ism, fi'l, and harf is. And after giving a definition to all of those categories, we then drill into the ism. And an ism is a person, place, thing, idea, adjectives, adverbs, and more. Also, an ism, every ism word is made up of 4 components: status, number, gender, and type. And if we only focus on status, that's further made up of 3 subcategories: rafa', nasab, and jar. The rafa' is the doer of the sentence, i.e. Hassan ate blah, blah, blah. The nasab is the detail of the sentence. So Hassan ate lunch yesterday outside. Those are the 3. That's the nasab aspect of the sentence. Thereafter, we went on to jar. And the jar we defined as the word that is after of. Could also say it's some kind of detail of a sentence, but in this specific case, it's a word that's after of. I also said there's multiple functions of jar, but that's a bit more complex. I also said in the last lesson that we can recognize the rafa', nasab, and jar by using the Arabic sounds, by listening to the Arabic sounds or reading the Arabic sounds at the end. That was the subject of lesson 4 on the slide handout. The reason why I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up on that in the last lesson, just to make things easier this lesson or in lesson 4 handout. But I didn't want to confuse everyone by talking too much about the ending sounds. But I just wanted to give an introduction on that. But essentially, jar is an after of. So if I was to think of a sentence, teacher of mine taught class, then the word after of in this case is mine. Therefore, that will be jar in status. Now, in English, it could get a little bit more complex, because you could rephrase that same sentence and say, my teacher taught class. The jar on this occasion would be my. Even though the word of isn't in the sentence, it would still be jar, because another way of saying that is teacher of mine. So that pretty much summarizes conceptually what we've gone through in class so far for the last 3 sessions. But the next stage up from this is to read the Arabic, specifically ayat or phrases from the Qur'an, and apply it in that context. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to lesson 1 slideshow, and we're only going to go through selected slides just so that it we become all really familiar with it. So let me just find. Okay. So we won't go through all of this because we've already been through all of it, but I want to remind ourselves on certain examples. So if I was to say, sorry, I need to annotation. Okay, we don't need to put the slideshow on. So let's think of a word. So amila. Amila here means he worked. He worked. So now, if we think back to that document I just did, we know what a fi'l is, we know what an ism is, and we know what a harf is. Which category does it fit when it says he worked? He worked. Well, we know fi'l is a word, has to be a word that is stuck in tense. And the fact that he worked is clearly stuck in a past tense, then we know that's a fi'l. Let's look at another word. Al-kalimatu. Al-kalimatu. The word. The word. This is probably an idea. It could be, might need more context, but you could say the word as in kalimatullah, the word of Allah. But the word is an idea. So therefore, that would be an ism. Any ideas are an ism. I also gave a couple of hacks. So, for example, if it has al in the Arabic in front of the word, then you know it's not going to be a fi'l because no fi'l will have an al. So that's one hack. Let's look at another word. Rajulun. Rajulun means a man. A man. It's not a fi'l because it's not stuck in tense. It's not a harf because it does make sense. Not a word that makes no sense unless there's another word after it. So we know it's an ism. By process of elimination, we know it's an ism. And here's another hack. If it has a tanween, then you know it's not going to be a fi'l and it's not going to be a harf. Therefore, it's going to be an ism. So that's 2 hacks that you know just to give you a shortcut. Ala. Ala means upon. Ala means upon. So therefore, it doesn't make any sense unless there's another word after it. Very clearly, it's a harf. Let's do one more. As-sabiru. As-sabiru. That's another ism, but let's do a fi'l. Okay, darasa. Darasa. He studied. He studied. That's the past tense. What's the present? What's the future tense? He will study. What's the present tense? He studies. Whatever tense it is, it's a fi'l. So that exercise is clear enough. Then let's look at lesson 2. Okay, let's look at these. I'm sure why it's stuck. There you go. Okay. So now we're going to apply the rafa' nasab categories on to these phrases, these ayat of the Quran. So Allah created you all. Allah created you all. So the first thing we need to think of is what's the action word here? And then that gives you your fi'l. So clearly it's created. The next question you need to ask yourself is who's doing the creating? Who's created what? Yeah, it says Allah created. So therefore, that's your doer. So if now that you've got your doer, Allah, you know the word Allah is rafa'. And what did Allah create? You all. You all. You all is the detail. So on this occasion, Wallahu is just asking you for the rafa'. Wallahu. And then if we go on this one, let's do 2 examples from here, and that would be our recap for rafa' and nasab. Okay, let's do the first one. Allah intends for you ease. Allah intends for you ease. So the first thing is, what's the action word? The action word is intends. Intends is the fi'l. Now you know the action, you got to ask yourself, who's doing the action? And then that's your doer. So the word Allah intends. So therefore the word Allah is rafa'. This is just a reminder. So, but I know the answers are there, but we need to go through the process so that our thought process is correct. I'd rather you go through the process and get the answer wrong, as opposed to, flukily getting the answer right, but not going through the correct process. So we know who the doer is, the word Allah. And what's the detail? You ease. What does Allah intend for you? He intends ease. So therefore, Allah, the word Allah is rafa', and ease is the word, is nasab. And قتل داود وقتل داود جالوت, we looked at that example last time. Killed is the action word. Who's doing the killing? Dawood alayhi salam. Therefore, Dawood alayhi salam is rafa'. And who's the detail? Jalut. Jalut is the detail. I then also briefly mentioned about the sounds in Arabic, but I'm not going to go into that today because there's a special lesson dedicated for that, lesson 4, and we can go over that next time. But let's just go over lesson 3, which is jar. We defined it as after of, and we looked at 3 examples. In the name of Allah, Bismillahi, Bismillahi. So if jar means the word after of, then in the English example here, in the name of Allah, what do you think which word do you think is jar? It is Allah, and it's circled here. Okay. We went through this last time, but it's good to refresh our memory. So the messenger of Allah, Rasulullahi. Why is the word Allah mentioned? Because it's jar. And why is it jar? Because it's the word after of on this occasion. Another way of rephrasing the messenger of Allah is Allah's messenger. Once again, the word Allah will still be jar because you just have to rephrase it in a way that it's after of. The day of separation, Yawm al-Fasli. Separation means al-Fasli. Therefore, the word jar in this occasion is separation. Hence, the word al-Fasli is circled. So I mentioned the way to recognize rafa', nasab, and jar is to look at the ending sounds. And for jar on this occasion is kasra. So whenever you see the kasra as the ending sound, then generally speaking, it is jar. But we're going to dedicate a whole session for that. I just wanted to get it out there so that giving you a heads up. And for rafa, it's a u sound or a un. For nasab, it's a or a an. And for jar, it's a e or a in sound. So I hope that's clear. Today was just spent on revision. Let's just do one more example of this. Let's do this penultimate one, Allah's help. Allah's help. So first question is, how do we find the jar on this? What's another way of saying Allah's help? It will be help of Allah. Help of Allah. Nasrullahi. If the phrase is help of Allah, then the jar status word is the word Allah. hence why the word Allah is circled. And the same with the religion of Allah, Deenullahi, Deenullahi. The word Allah is jar. So let's go back to my scruffy document. And we could define this as after of. So what I'm going to do each lesson, I'm going to start from a clean slate, and we're just going to go through this. And we don't have to write it in as much detail as I did today, but we're going to use this as consolidated notes, and we're going to do it consistently, and you'll be surprised how much it will just sink in. And once everything's there in front of you as a one-pager, then it will just become really clear, as opposed to, the handouts are there and they're really useful as reference, and we need to absolutely go through them all. But if you can perhaps make your own notes, then that will really help in digesting all of the concepts. So I would like you to do something similar to this. You don't have to make it as scruffy as mine, but you can do it really neat if you like. But I want you to start right from the beginning and try not to look at your notes. Just try to say, look, 3 types of words in Arabic. Ism, fi'l, harf. Define what ism is. You can go through the 7 category. Define what fi'l is, stuck in a tense. You can just give an example word just to make it easy, and just give an example word of a harf, and then go deeper into ism. It's made up of 4 components: status, number, gender, and type. And then for status, write the 3 words down of rafa, nasab, and jar, and then give like an English sentence example of where you can label a rafa, nasab, and a jar, and make sure it has an action word, like this example here, 8. So Hassan ate lunch yesterday. And then you can do some similar word for jar where there's a word that's after of. And then in the next lesson, we're going to concentrate on ending sounds in Arabic. So because in English, it's all about the sequential order of rafa coming first and then nasab coming after, whereas in Arabic, that's not necessarily the case. It's all about the ending sound of a word, and we'll look at that in more detail, inshallah. So we'll leave it here. أقول قولي هذا بارك الله لي ولكم بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن الحكيم ونفعني وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.